Welcome to another episode of K-Thugs Community Square. We are holding the microphone and privileged again to have Harbor Commissioner Annie Nehmer here. And I appreciate you coming back and agreeing to answer some of my questions that I had regarding the harbor, the USDA loan, and then I promise we'll absolutely bring you back in to talk about the other things that you were talking about that on our last conversation we kind of didn't get a chance to bring up. You're an incredible wealth of knowledge and so many interested things. So I appreciate that.
Thank you for having me back.
Not a problem. Again, I appreciate it. And then if I can just kind of pick your brain a little bit here about the Harbor's USDA loan and when that happened, why we have that, the TOT tax, right? Because it's a lot there. If you can just kind of give us a brief history of what that is and what we'll be discussing.
Sure. The harbor has a USDA loan with, I think it was due to the 2011 tsunami devastating the harbor. They took out a loan. The repairs were $45 or $50 million. The loan was nearly $5 million. The harbor was making payments, and in 2018, they realized that they were struggling to make the payments. So a measure was put on the ballot, Measure C, to fund the repayment of the USDA loan, which is approximately $262,000 a year. In order to generate those funds, they increased the TOT tax, the transient occupancy tax, or the hotel Airbnb tax. Any short-term stay less than 30 days. I think the rate before the increase was 8%. They increased it to 10%, so 2% now goes to the harbor.
Okay, and that specifically to pay back the loan.
Yes, and actually it doesn't go to the harbor. It goes to a county escrow account. So thankfully, at the time, the county was sharp enough to set up an escrow account. So those 2% of those funds they put in an account set up for the harbor district to pay the USDA loan annually on September 1st and then ask for reimbursement of that payment.
Okay, so I'm just going to make sure that I understand this correctly, because this is my understanding is the harbor pays the bill and then says, hey, we paid our bill, and then Delaware County says, oh, here you go, and then gives back that money to put back into the harbor's account.
Correct.
All right. So it's just, that's what the reimbursement is for.
Correct.
And then it's my understanding that in September of 2005, when that payment was due, when the USDA loan payment was due, it wasn't paid.
Correct.
Okay. So did the county go ahead and give the harbor the TOT tax that is sitting in the county's account?
No. So
and they can't, right? Because it's a reimbursement. It's not an advancement.
It's a reimbursement, and if the harbor is in a pinch, the harbor can request that the county directly pay that loan payment.
Okay. And then and it's also, again, it's my understanding that did not take place.
That did not take place.
The Crescent City Harbor District did not pay the USDA loan, nor did they ask Delaware County to go ahead and pay it for them because they didn't have enough money to.
That's correct. So those funds have been sitting there. They are available, and there was a decision made by an independent consultant not to make the payment, and then the majority of the board went along with it retroactively.
But by going along with it, you mean they held a vote and said, okay, we're just not gonna pay it? Or they just didn't do anything about it, and so therefore they went along with it by default?
They went along with it by default without having a discussion around publicly transparent discussion, discussing why we're doing this, what our cash flow projections are, and our reasons for withholding this payment. Because again, the public's already funded the money. This isn't property tax money or revenues from the harbor.
This is our tourists paying this extra 2%
right,
to pay back the loan that we agreed to under the Measure C to do.
Correct. And so now that we haven't made that payment, it's also accruing additional interest, I think to around the tune of $10,000 at this point, of additional interest that now the taxpayers have to foot. Somebody's going to foot that bill.
Oh, I didn't even consider that. Wait, so it wasn't paid in September, and we're now in April of 20. So it wasn't paid in September of 2005. in 2025. And we are now in April of 2026, and it still hasn't been paid.
Correct.
Do you know what the current interest rate is owed because it hasn't been paid? Is there penalties because it hasn't been paid?
The board is told that the board gave Sandy Moreno authorization to have discussions with USDA.
Okay, I'm going to pause here. Sandy Moreno is
the hired independent contractor that is supposed to help manage or get the harbor financials on track.
So she's an independent contractor.
Yes.
Okay. I apologize. I thought this entire time she was the harbor's bookkeeper.
No, she is not staff. She should be staff, even though she was hired with a giant conflict of interest.
What would that conflict of interest be?
She also works for a fashion blacksmith, and we have the fashion blacksmith debt.
Okay, so this is a lot. What fashion blacksmith debt can you tell us what's going on there?
Yeah, so prior to becoming a commissioner, I was one of the last boats, or the last boat hauled out at Fashion Blacksmith while the owners were going through a lawsuit with the harbor. The harbor had failed to renew its dredging permit and then took out a battle against the owners, and the harbor lost.
Okay. What does Fashion Blacksmith do?
They were the boatyard for the harbor, so they hauled out boats. Well, the harbor used to be able to haul out boats, but they failed to maintain the piers essentially and the travel lift, so the harbor was no longer able to do it. So then Fashion was the only person that could haul out boats in our port, and they his father used to build boats out on Parkway and haul them and launch them at the harbor until
his father?
Ted Long at Fashion Blacksmith.
Okay.
So again, multi-generational family owned business that was put out. As a member of the public at the time, I thought it was a personal vendetta. Like the harbor master got into a disagreement with the owners, and it was said that the commissioners wanted him out in order to put a hotel there. There's been a lot of background chatter around the harbor at the time about whether a hotel could or could not go in due to regulations and coastal and.
Okay, and by coastal you mean coastal commission?
Yeah.
Okay,
and
so
I've never sussed that out, whether a hotel could or could not be placed there. I have no idea.
So that's right, because it's Crescent City, it's Delaware County, it's the rumor mill, and we're all intertwined with our families and histories and the whole thing. So I appreciate you acknowledging that was the background chatter. Who was the harbor master at the time? What time
Tim
frame?
Petrick.
Okay, so how long ago was this?
His case was settled in 24,
Okay.
and I think it went on for 3 years. So 21 is when it would have started, I believe.
Okay, so 2 years ago, Fashion Blacksmith sued the harbor for...
They sued the harbor. Went through arbitration. They won with painstakingly long arbitration. They won and proved that they were wronged, and the harbor lost. Now the harbor owes them millions.
Oh, wow.
So there's 2 different debts we have to pay each year, January 1st and March, the beginning of March. We haven't paid the March one. We don't have the money.
Oh, okay. So the USDA loan that was supposed to be paid in September of 2025 didn't get paid, and the March payment to Fashion Blacksmith for having lost a lawsuit hasn't been paid either.
Nope. Nor has any insurance on the Innerboat Basin been found or paid either. So in June 25th, 2025, the board was informed that we couldn't afford Innerboat Basin insurance. The staff had never gone out and found a second quote or attempted to. And so this board was advised that the USDA didn't require Innerboat Basin insurance, so the board trusted that staff knew what they were talking about and voted to not pay the Innerboat Basin insurance because we wouldn't be able to afford getting through the year. Instead, the board reserved $181,500 in our LAIF account, our reserve money account.
So the LAIF, what is the LAIF account?
Off the top of my head, I don't remember the acronym, but all government agencies are in the state are able to use LAIF as a savings account, if you will, that's kind of managed by the state and earns interest.
Okay. So you kept not you personally, but the harbor kept the 100, you said it was how much, 181,000 for the insurance for the inner boat basin in that LAIF account. So basically the harbor savings account. Why don't you guys use the money from that account to pay some of the debts that are owed?
There's not enough money to do that and continue operating.
Like by operating, you mean like keeping the lights on and paying employees?
I think if we pay the insurance, I don't have it in front of me today. I believe at the last meeting there was 264,000 in that account. Maybe there's 364. Either way, that's not an. I think if we pay the insurance, there's not enough to pay fashion. If we pay fashion, the account is at zero. So
how much is owed to Fashion Blacksmiths as of March?
The account we paid 184 for the December 1st, and I think it's. I should know this off the top of my head. 362.
So roughly 300,000.
Yeah.
No, so just shy of 400,000.
A lot of money.
That is a lot of money.
And it's not this year. It wasn't last year. It's an annual payment. Both of those are annual payments. So if we can afford it this year, how do we afford it next year? If it takes our account down to zero today, how do we afford it next year?
If it takes your account down to zero, is there, so that's out of the savings account. Is there another account that pays for the employees to be there?
So the harbor generates monthly revenue off of the commercial properties, the hoists, the processing plants, the docks, the recreational fishermen, Port-au-Pines, England Marine.
The RV parks, all of the things. Right. So you have monthly.
Right. So there's some monthly income to continue keeping the lights on, if you will. However, when raises at the tune of 10 to 20% annually to all employees has been going on, it's hard to keep the lights on and still make all of those payroll expenses.
The employees at the harbor are getting 20% raises every year?
The harbor master specifically has been a couple times. So that's how they justify. Tim Petrick, a couple different times, received over 20% raises. So the justification for overpaying the current harbor master is, well, it's less than the last guy. Well, you overpaid the last guy.
Right. But you're giving, it just sounds like to me like this is a slow drain.
It's not a slow drain anymore.
Okay. Yeah.
It actually was never a slow drain. When they paid Fashion Blacksmith, when the settlement came in, they robbed from Peter to pay Paul. They also received the settlement from the Dutra lawsuit. So when...
Wait, what's that?
So when the tsunami wiped out the harbor, they had to bring in a contractor and subcontractors. And the harbor said, some of this isn't done right, so we're going to sue. So years-long lawsuits went on. When it was finally settled, they ended up with nearly $1 million settlement.
The harbor did.
The harbor did, to fix the things that aren't working. So the electrical in the harbor isn't right. There's grounding issues and whatnot. It's known. That's why a lot of the boats left and went to Brookings. That's why it's hard to find a commercial slip in Brookings, but not in Crescent City.
Okay. And by slip, you mean a place to dock, to park your boat?
Yes.
Gotcha.
And so that year, in May of 24, you can look at the minutes and you can see in April, May, that they called him the comptroller. The guy who was managing the money said, ding, 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 we're out of money, we're broke. The harbor master didn't even get paid for 2 weeks while they were broke waiting for that settlement to come in. That settlement came in and bam, the accounts were suddenly running again. Raises were happening.
What year was this?
24. May of 2024.
Good Lord. And that was the same year that Fashion Blacksmith won its millions of dollars lawsuit.
So rather than fixing the issues at the harbor that the harbor won the settlement for, they took that money and paid the fashion settlements that were due and continued on their spending spree rather than pulling in the reins and going, hey, we have a spending problem. So it was known a couple years ago by then staff and board members that this was coming, but we're waiting until we're insolvent to do so.
Is the harbor currently insolvent? Are we looking at another situation like it was in 24 where you're not going to be able to pay people for 2 weeks?
Yes.
Or longer?
I brought that issue up April, May of 25, and I said, we're going to be broke within 4 to 9 months. And then Sandy stood up and said, why would I say that? That's terrible. And then at the last meeting, Commissioner Schmidt pointed out that we only have 4 months left until July, and Sandy verified that. Now, my numbers were true if we paid all of our bills, but as we've mentioned, we aren't paying all of our bills now. So we have until July, which is now verified by a commissioner and the lady running the books.
Okay, till July, till the harbor's bankrupt?
Till we're at zero. So no one knows what to do during bankruptcy. During bankruptcy, you would do what they're doing right now, which is trying to renegotiate the USDA loan and the fashion blacksmithing loan and the auto. But what's not happening...
What do you mean the auto?
We have like 4 trucks that have been leased.
Okay.
So during the spending spree, rather than trying to fix the clunker trucks that we had, they were old, needing a lot of repairs. And in years past, what they would do is go to auctions. So for instance, Arcata just had an auction, and we should have bought a used truck or 2 from them that was still good, had a few years left, and was affordable. But instead they went on a spending spree and leased 4 trucks. So double the insurance on each one of those vehicles, plus lease payments. And now we're at time to pay the end of the lease, those balloon payments that come with leases, while we don't have any money.
Okay. This is a lot. So we talked about in the beginning, we talked about the monthly income from the RV parks, from Porta Pints, from slip fees, all of those things. What is that on a monthly basis?
I can use my phone and pull up the books.
Okay. And that's not sufficient to keep it going from month to month? I mean, because that's not ideal, but it's still, that monthly income is not enough to pay the employees to do.
Well, it's enough to pay the employees. It's not enough to pay any of the debts.
Okay.
And if you continue on spending sprees without generating revenue, it's just not sustainable. But you can't make your debt disappear.
No, your debt's still going to be there. So the spending spree's already taken place, correct? It's already done. Are they still spending sprees in the harbor?
No, now it's just the opposite. Instead of, there were never spending sprees on maintenance. Obviously, anyone can see that.
Yeah.
But instead, there's been even a crackdown on just doing the maintenance. The maintenance guys are doing the best they can, but there's roofs that need repaired and doors and siding. You look around, it's dilapidated. So even the essentials, the basics aren't being fixed. It's been many meetings. Members of the public have come complaining about a light bulb being out. And the excuse is, well, we need a crane from down south. Well, now we can't find the light bulb. So we don't know. You can't fix a light bulb.
Right. So when I watch the meetings and I read about it on Redwood Voice and I do all of the other things, it seems so petty and argumentative. Right? Like the light bulb, and we need a crane, and we need to do these things. How are what is the morale of the employees like? They have to be able to look at this and be like, this is not good. We are not going to have jobs. Are they starting to look for new work, or is it just really a hard time to find work? So they're going to tough it out and see what happens, wait until they have to be laid off so they can get unemployment. Do you talk to the harbor staff to find out how they feel?
Well, the harbor staff is pretty small, so we have 2 people in the office. For maintenance personnel, they're under the labor union, fortunately, so they do have some protections, and then harbor security. And I believe everyone who's staff at the harbor enjoys their job because they're putting up with it. As one put it, it's a flamin' jalapeno.
I would kind of understand the sentiment behind that, but jalapenos are good.
Yeah.
Wow. This is a lot.
So it's interesting that you asked that, because a lot of the public, the commercial fishermen, recreational fishermen that go in there, they thank and appreciate Janice and Christina. Billy is the lead maintenance guy. Like those individuals are appreciated for the work that the public sees them doing.
Yeah, of course. That one, they're our neighbors, and 2, they're doing the work.
Well, it hasn't always been that way in the harbor. You used to go in the office and you were treated with rudeness and anger and hostility by the front office lady. So the staff that's there is at least agreeable, pleasant, and gets the job done for the public.
That's never been my experience. But again, I'm not a fisherman, so I don't spend as much time in the harbor doing the things that those who make it their home, their business, not home, but there as much as you guys are. Wow. So, and I know this is going to sound really weird, but like when I drive by and things, when the RV parks aren't full. They weren't full last year for 4th of July. They're not. Is that a way to increase? Is that just like a little bit of money, so it's not worth doing because we don't have maintenance? Or is that a substantial amount of money that we just left on the table? And how does that tie into the investors that we are bringing in for the RV parks? Will that bring in more revenue for us to get out of the debt and to move forward? Or is it just not a sufficient thing? Because it seems to be a lot of contention in the harbor meetings around this investment.
Well, the RV parks have been contention for years now. I remember going to those meetings when we used to have an RV park full of locals living there.
And then we kicked them all out.
And then we kicked them all out.
And had to find them new housing.
For a developer. And the pretense that the board led the public to believe was that the investor would have paid for all those rehoming and all those court fees. And it was actually the harbor that ended up paying all those fees.
Oh, my God.
Mm-hmm. And then
the harbor paid for all of that relocation and all of that cost?
Not the relocation, all of the ones that had to go through evictions. The harbor paid for those court fees and attorney's fees.
That's not cheap.
Not the investor. I don't remember off the top of my head, but $15,000 or something. You know, one of them.
And that was a fairly recent thing, right? Like 23?
Yeah, 22, 23. And then that went belly up, even though the public warned them this developer wasn't going to be sufficient, wasn't going to uphold this. He actually, he owed the harbor $286,000 over the solar panel deal. And rather than saying you owe us $286,000, we're not going into a contract with you, the then board said, yeah, this is a great idea. Let's roll your old debt into the RV park and you'll pay us through the old debt. We'll tear down this South Beach bathroom. We'll let you put up a new bathroom, and that's how you'll make your debt square. And we still don't have a bathroom, and we lost 2 years of RV funds, and now we have a board who doesn't want to hold anyone accountable for letting the RV parks be in the condition they are today.
Okay, so how long? So you say we've lost 2 years of RV funds for the harbor, and if this happened in 22, that's 4 years ago.
Right. So the harbor has had back in their full legal possession for a couple years the RV parks, where they were able to maintain them, beautify them, market them.
So they're being marketed.
Well, I worked, it was my first goal as a commissioner, and I worked really hard. I spent hours combing through the right company to use, like an Airbnb or VRBO, trying to find that right platform to put the RV parks on to get the parks full for 4th of July. And it took, I finally got Rover Pass approved, and then we went to...
What is Rover Pass approved?
A Rover Pass is like an Airbnb or a VRBO. It's a platform for RVs.
Short-term rentals.
Yeah,
gotcha.
But for people traveling.
Okay.
And the board approved it and then asked staff to employ it, and staff said, we don't like that, we don't want to. And I guess that was my mistake in the learning curve of being a new commissioner. Is I should have said, no, the board voted on this. You will implement Rover Pass. And instead I said, okay, the staff doesn't want to use it. They used it once upon a time. I'll go back to the drawing board and find the second next best company. So I did, which was New Book. And we employed that. It took a lot of teeth pulling. It took arguing with other commissioners about why there was an argument. We can't do this. We can't open the RV parks up and let people rent. It's false pretense. I said, there's nothing false when you take pictures of your facilities, you make it known on this website. Like if you're on an Airbnb and you say, I have a 5-star mansion on the ocean, and you're a mile from Kellogg in a 2-1, it's false advertising.
Gotcha.
But if you list the RV parks as is condition, people aren't coming for your RV park. They're coming for the view on South Beach and the Redwoods.
Yeah. So I'm guessing, right, if we think it's that the RV parks are a mess and we are saying that they're not suitable to renting out.
That was the excuse for not doing anything. Okay. And so rather than saying...
Is that true? Are they that big of a mess that shouldn't be rented out?
I mean, I'm not an RVer, so I don't know when you drive around the country what your expectations are as an RVer.
Well,
But
people park in the freaking Walmart parking lot and stay there for several nights and then move on. So I'm going to go with if that are.
yeah, so at one point they were listed for dry camping, except they weren't listed on one of these websites. It just had a sign you couldn't read at the park saying dry camping.
Oh my God. So they're not being marketed. They're not being booked. They're not being utilized. How long has it been since they have been properly utilized and had monthly revenue on a regular basis to equal what it was when we evicted our neighbors so that we could do this?
Well, in the last year, they've picked up just on their own by placing them on that New Book platform. So New Book is like Airbnb or some of them where you can link to other platforms. So it's on Hip Camp as well, which is another RV website.
Okay.
And so we get revenue from Hip Camp and New Book regularly. You saw the 4th of July, it was full. So there was a hiccup.
Was it on 4th of July?
It was nearly full.
Okay.
But so there was a hiccup on the harbor's end. After we got New Book up and running in the platform, somehow the harbor's back end stopped working, and thankfully members of the public called me. We were able to get it fixed just 4 days before the 4th.
Oh, wow.
And just in that short window of time, it went from almost no bookings to being full because we're the only RV park that's not full for the 4th here.
Yeah, so that was just fortuitous. That wasn't proper management.
Right. So thank
and
you.
4th of July is so big here that if you were going to rent out... no, I won't say that. Yep, if you have anything available for somebody to sleep or park or anything else, then you're going to sell it out.
Yeah. So it should already be sold out. I don't know any other RV park in town that isn't sold out.
But years in advance.
Right.
All the Airbnbs, the hotels.
But our RV park isn't full. So if you know anyone who would like an RV park, I can't tell you to come because I don't know if we'll be managing it or somebody else. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, this is a lot. So oh my God. So
we go broke in July, but I don't know if I can tell you to come book at our RV park because I'm not sure if we'll be managing it or if we'll have leased it to somebody else.
We're going to lease the RV park. So a stream of revenue that we can capture 100% of the dollars for, we're going to lease to somebody else and capture what percentage of that dollar?
14%.
That doesn't...
12%, 10%, whatever happens in a negotiation.
So it's still being negotiated.
Yeah, I don't know. But, it's if you are leasing to somebody else and so we have maintenance on staff and we have admin on staff and maybe we have to hire another maintenance guy.
So we're still responsible for the maintenance on getting whatever percentage of the RV park that they've leased.
If we lease it out, they will be 100% responsible for administration and maintenance.
Okay.
But that means they'll have to pay somebody to do that unless they're capable. But as a harbor, we have a maintenance staff and an administration staff already handling it, just not being led to do it correctly.
Well, there's no money to pay for the things that they need to do it correctly, right?
If you hired a park manager, couldn't a park manager do the job?
Well, we don't have money to hire a park manager, it doesn't sound like.
Well, the parks sitting there are generating revenue, as is right now, doing nothing, not maintaining it, not weed eating it, nothing. Oh, wait,
Okay.
The bathrooms are being cleaned.
Okay.
So you can take a clean shower.
Okay. So the park generates without any manager, without any efforts, without any cleaning, without anything. It generates enough money at this point in time to support other things within the harbor. Why would we lease that out to another company?
$75,000 so far. We've netted off of it.
Okay, so it generates. Good Lord!
Because if you lease it out, then you don't have to do the work.
But you're not going to net it. But we need that money from the RV park, correct?
I agree with you 1,000%. I think we should be doing the work, and we should have always been doing the work. I have been a strong proponent of the harbor being responsible for harbor facilities my entire tenure. But if you cannot have a board as a whole come to a consensus to hold staff accountable for not doing their job, then what's the next best option?
Right, but you just said that, right, the people in the office are nice and that the maintenance workers are doing the best that they can with what you mean the harbor master.
Correct.
Sorry, I'll catch right back up. I need more coffee. So you mean the harbor master's not being held accountable to do his job?
Correct.
Okay. When will this... I'm trying to put this all together, and this is a lot. This is a lot. Where does the lease to an outside company for the RV parks pay for the lawsuit to Fashion Blacksmith and the loan to the USDA?
Nothing. It doesn't at all. So these are all hypothetical numbers. You know, at a couple of the meetings I brought it up. If we leased it out, bare minimum lease we'd have to receive is $90,000 a year, just so we don't go below what we're already generating currently. So right now we've made $75,000. Our calendar year doesn't end until July 1.
Okay.
So we've netted 75. So if what I said during the ad hoc and what I've said in open session is that we shouldn't go below 90,000, because you certainly wouldn't want to lease it out to somebody for less than you're already making, and the place isn't even being taken care of.
Right. Yeah. That makes no sense. That's like saying I get $100,000 for existing, right? Because we're just going to do easy math. I get $100,000 for existing and doing this job. But I am going to now do this for $50,000.
Mm-hmm.
It's you're losing money for no reason, and you need that money. It sounds like, and the harbor desperately needs that money. So,
right. And so if you lease it out to somebody and they, you know, I don't know what the potential of the parks is. I know what Lighthouse Cove next door, the city makes. I know
what does the city make off of Lighthouse Cove?
They don't make a substantial amount.
But they maintain theirs.
They have hired maintenance. They have hired administration. And they received a $1 million grant that the harbor could also qualify for. Explore the Coast is a grant through California Coastal Conservancy that both the city and county have been awarded for their... one was for Clifford Camp. It was much smaller for the county, but the city was awarded like $1 million to fix up the RV park to make it nice. The caveat is that a small portion of that 5 or 10% has to be allocated for lower income, so everyone has accessibility to staying on the coast.
So basically you would have, if you had 100 campsites for RVs, you would have to have 5 or 10 of those sites that were at a reduced rate for somebody who was low income.
Correct.
Would that allow them to rent it long term, or is that still less than 30 days?
Part of the grant is, and part of the Coastal Commission requirements is that these are all short-term stay. So the few tenants that are left in Bayside RV Park are all grandfathered in. Everyone now must be 30 days or less.
How many tenants are still there that can stay long term?
I believe there are 38.
Okay. How many sites are there for RV parking?
Currently, there are over 200. They do need to be changed because our vehicles have gotten larger, and so the park does need to be redone. So RHV has over 100, and so does Bayside. It kind of needs to come down to 100 spaces in each park.
Okay, and both of those are harbor properties?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, and so here's the fun part where everyone assumes harbor property is state lands because the state granted the harbor through a state lands grant the harbor. But what a lot of people don't realize is that road that goes between Port-au-Prince and Fashion Blacksmith from the inner boat basin to the beach, that road is the cutoff. So anything west of that road is state lands. You're talking England Marine, the boat building, that's all state lands. Okay. That cannot be sold. Anything east of that, Port-au-Prince, the car wash, the RV parks, even part of the green space. There's 2 lots right next to the Purple Cat. Those can all be sold. They're fee simple properties. And the board and harbor master are aware of that. A couple of the harbor commissioners, myself included, are adamant that everything never be sold. But if the harbor doesn't generate money, there has been... I'm sure there has been chatter that some of the stuff be sold. Years ago when Fashion was in their lawsuit, I was convinced that they were suing him and circling the drain in order to sell off those RV parks to an investor or a friend, because why else would you not maintain the RV parks? Why else
generate so much money every year?
Yeah, why else would you give them to a developer that everyone said begged the commission not to?
Okay. So when you said that the RV parks have netted so far, you mean after everything else, that's the profit. You've paid whatever. So you believe that, is that being talked about in the Harbor Commission, having to sell off the land
Mm,
to pay the debts, to make it solvent, to do whatever it is?
no, not
Okay.
yet.
Okay. You're suspicious, is what you're saying.
N- Uh,
You're concerned that that might be what's taking place.
no, I had a member of the public call me and said they had called Senator McGuire's office. This is months ago during the harbor discussions that were held at the Elks Lodge. During that time, a member of the public called McGuire's office and inquired about the harbor, and they called me and said, hey, did you know the harbor master had called McGuire's office and asked if they could sell off the RV park and how to make that happen? And that's when I went from suspicion years ago as what I thought this was going to happen to this is reality. Our harbor master has called the senator's office and said, how do I do this? And of course, this is coming through a member of the public. I didn't call the senator's office to verify this, but it was enough for me to think years of my suspicion. And it wasn't just my suspicion. This is scuttle around the harbor being talked about.
Yeah.
How do you pay the bills? If you can't manage your assets and you can keep giving yourself raises, how do you end up paying the bills one day?
So there's no sustainability within the harbor, even if it's just scraping by. It is headed towards bankruptcy,
At
and
this
it's
point.
not paying legally obligated debts.
Correct. If you can't generate revenue some other way, so the RV parks are a clear source of revenue that the whole community
But we want to give that
sees.
lease to somebody else. How much do we get? Is there any like cash payment to the harbor, upfront money to pay any of that debt?
All that's still in negotiations. So I don't know about that, but you have the Commissioner Schmidt brought a map from the county at the last meeting, and that map was of the harbor and the harbor buildings, and it has a list of each hoist operator, which company operates it, and the buildings. So we all know the old abalone building back in the 80s and 90s. There was an abalone farm out there. And then it was turned into illegal housing. People knew it was illegal, but on the map, it shows that it's harbor employee housing. No, I don't know who told the county that it was harbor employee housing if it was illegal, but it also lists the old Coast Guard building as the executive office for the harbor. It's never been the harbor office. The main harbor office is 101 Citizens Dock. It's been that way as long as the building's been in existence. But yet whoever reported to all that information to the county has these two other buildings locked up as harbor facilities, and they're not being leased out. Now, it turns out the Coast Guard building, the story was that when the Coast Guard left Crescent City, within a year or two, the Coast Guard would sign over the deed to the property, and then we could rent it out. But until the deed was signed over, the harbor couldn't rent it out. And we were fed that story. And finally, I said, we've been fed this story without any proof. So let me just call the U.S. Coast Guard and get a real timeline on this. And my contact at the U.S. Coast Guard said that it wasn't a priority, but with all of the current administration's attempts at divesting a bunch of federal properties that weren't being used, I thought, why haven't they unloaded this property yet? And so it's in the process of being divested. That last shutdown that happened, we're waiting for DHS, Department of Homeland Security, to come back online to afford the fees to actually sign the deed over to the harbor. So any month now, the Coast Guard should be up and available for leasing. So you would think the building should be repaired or the door should be operational or whatever so that somebody would want to lease it. But that's not happening.
Well, there's no funds, it sounds like, to do any of that work.
Well, there in the budget, it was allocated, though.
But wasn't it also allocated to pay the debts that were owed?
Yes.
Okay.
The abalone building, not rented out. And I had a member of the public call me and say that Cal Poly Humboldt was interested, but there's no follow-up there. The car wash, there were members of the public that were interested in that, and they were told that's not possible. It has to have a water reclamation system. That member of the public had already gone through the time and the permitting and looked into what it was going to take to reopen the car wash. And this is back with the previous harbor master. So this isn't in the last 2 years, but it was 5 years ago. They had done all the research to make the car wash up and running, and they were turned down by the harbor. So tell me why the harbor would turn down a member of the public from opening up the car wash again and meeting all the state mandates. I don't have the answers to that. I just know what they told me.
Okay.
I know that three different fishermen last year came to me and said, we want to rent the old sheriff's building. I gave them the contact number of the harbor master, and it was never rented out. One of them is still interested. The other two are not. We'll see if it gets rented out. But no, the seafood place, gone. So there's lost revenue since I've been a commissioner.
Why did they leave? Was it just they were done with their business and leave, or was it just dealing with the harbor and all their crap made it almost impossible to do? I mean, because what you're describing, like, we have a word for this, right? It's FUBAR.
Yeah, I've never held a conversation with him, so I don't know.
Okay.
Was it just that the building is in enough disrepair? Was he not generating enough revenue, being open year round?
Yeah, it could be lots of different things.
I don't know.
This is a lot, and again, it's some of this is speculation. Some of this is your harbor commissioner, and I'm sure you can't give us the details on what you know because those are.
Well, it is hard because I had a lot of speculations as a member of the public going into this, being at meetings for years.
Is that why you ran for the harbor commission?
Yes, I went to meetings for years and was that voice in the public for fishermen. I would have people call me, "Hey, this is going on. Can you speak?" Sure. And it didn't matter what the public said to the board; it fell on deaf ears every time, and it continues. So I thought, okay, I'll be a voice at the meetings and we'll have change. And I found out that wasn't true. So then I was like, okay, I'll have a vote. Well, now I'm a minority vote, so it still doesn't matter.
But I still think it's important for people to exercise, to speak and to use their voice clearly. I'm in community radio. So I appreciate that. Is this part of the reason, because we were talking about it the last time you were here about the censure, this is how you were using your voice and why you were censured. It was to silence you so that you stopped trying to find these things out.
This is exactly why. Because in the month of June 25th, after we voted to not renew the Interboat Basin insurance based on the staff saying they had read the documentation, the loan contract with USDA, the next morning I woke up and said, oh shit, I didn't see that document and I'm the one who made that decision. Where is that document? The harbor didn't have that document, so I requested it from the USDA. That's how the conversation between us and the USDA began, was my email. It took a few phone calls to find the right guy to email. To email the guy and ask for the loan document between the harbor and the USDA and what were our insurance obligations.
Okay, and it's my understanding, just from having lived for 51 years and having been a former insurance agent, that when you have a loan that way, you have to have insurance.
You do have to have insurance. And being a vessel owner, I also have to have insurance. So I reached out to my insurance agent who said, yeah, sure, let them send. She sent me the forms their underwriter would require and said, have the harbor fill these documents out and we'll send them a quote. You can definitely get wind, water, and wave coverage. Now, that June 25th meeting, the board was told they couldn't get wind, water, and wave coverage. It was impossible. And in one phone call, I'd found somebody to insure us, but staff has not completed the documents to get a second quote.
And by staff, do you mean a specific staff member? Or
the harbor master is in charge of making those decisions and either completing the documents or delegating it. So
okay. So you're holding the harbor master responsible.
Yes. And
okay.
The board doesn't hold him responsible, so ultimately we're failing the public.
Okay. What would you like the public to know other than the debts aren't being paid and then in July, essentially, there will be no money and that the RV parks are going to be leased out when it's the only reliable source of income on a regular basis? I mean, you have the monthly incomes from the other businesses and things. What would you like the public to know?
Well, I'd like the public so far has slowly been showing up and stating their issues. And if more of the public could reach out and state the issues and try to hold the board accountable, that would be great. I'm not sure I think numbers talk. I think the more people you have there speaking the truth, whatever your truth is, makes a difference. But the other thing we're not talking about is the 12-month projections. We didn't make that USDA loan payment in September, so The interest is accruing, compounding on that loan itself, which is an extra $10,000.
Is that a year or is that monthly?
That's just the additional interest on not making that payment.
Okay.
So it's not the annual interest. It's the additional interest from not making that payment. But what does it look like for the taxpayer and the local person in 1 year and 5 years and 20 years when we're still paying this loan, but now we're reconfiguring the debt? We're attempting to push off this payment this year, or maybe next year's. The board didn't make these decisions. We're allowing somebody else to make these decisions without coming to us and telling us that if we put off the payment this year or in 2 years, what does that look like in 40 years? Does the 2% TOT tax cover it? I promise you it doesn't, because it barely covers the payment this now.
Right. Good God.
And also, same with fashion blacksmith. If you keep passing the buck, there's interest that accrues. If you refinance a loan, we all know this on our mortgage, you refi and you carry it out, you're paying more interest.
What is the penalty? So does the harbor lost the lawsuit against fashion blacksmith, and they agreed to a payment plan, clearly.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be somewhere within that settlement that says, and if you don't pay, there's a penalty. What is that penalty?
I'm definitely not a lawyer. I've only read the arbitration award twice. And from what I can remember of it is if we fail to make a payment, he has to take us back to court. I'm sure.
So there's going to be attorney fees. There's going to be time. There's going to be, that could be, that potentially could add a substantial amount to the award that he should be given.
If we're responsible, we would attempt to renegotiate that beforehand, before he takes us back to court. But I'm no attorney, so I certainly haven't made friends on the board, so I'm generally kept out of the loop. I know only 2 board commissioners are supposed to talk, but I'm generally kept out of the loop.
Because of the Brown Act. So you're referring to the Brown Act, and you're not supposed to get together outside of the public view and decide these things.
But also deciding these things means what are the ramifications for the public next year and 5 years? What are the ramifications for our youth, for your tax dollar?
Yeah. Is there an end to Measure C, or is that just a 2% additional tax that will always be there for the transit occupancy tax, the TOT tax?
It'll always be there unless somebody tries to repeal it. And then,
which there has been talk of repealing the TOT tax, or at least reallocating it so it doesn't go to the harbor.
There has been, yes, because the harbor's not using it to make the payment it was designated to pay. So the way the Measure C wording is that we will make the payment. We can also opt to make additional principal during the year. So some years the TOT tax exceeds $262,000 at that 2%.
Does that full TOT tax, that extra 2%, go to paying off the principal if it's above what we owe is the payment?
Does not. So the county, the way they set it up is that there must be $50,000 held in escrow before anything extra can go anywhere.
Okay.
That way, in case there's a year that's short, there's some money to cover it. So again, whoever wrote it with the county was thinking ahead.
Yeah, I think
doing some projections.
Right. I think at the time, Joel Campbell Blair was the attorney for the county council.
I really didn't follow politics and had no plans of becoming a politician until I went to a meeting and said, why did you take my trash can away and I can't throw my trash away at the harbor anymore? That's what caused it.
That's why I ran for office.
You took my trash can away.
I ran for office because I didn't like the way my representative voted on one thing. So I get you.
Yeah. I watched them.
I've had all I can stand.
Weed eating for 2 weeks nonstop. I couldn't figure out. I was like, babe, why are they weed eating? They're throwing rocks everywhere. Why don't they just use the mower? They had enough hours to justify to the board hiring out the landscaping. So previous harbor master Tim Petrick convinced the board. We spent 2 weeks doing all this landscaping, see all of the hours, and that's how they convinced the board to hire out landscaping.
Oh my God.
Because they were weed eating the whole place.
Okay.
So that's what got me to go to these meetings. It's like, why are they throwing rocks all over the pavement all the time?
Oh my gosh. So is it still hired out, the landscaping?
It is not. That was killed about a year ago. Who can afford $70,000 a year in landscaping when you're going broke?
Yeah.
Well, somebody who might be, getting.
Did they reduce the maintenance staff when they hired out for the things that maintenance was doing?
Of course not.
So what?
It's a labor union.
Oh, yeah.
Well, carpenters union.
Did the maintenance people want that to happen, or was that something the harbor master was doing, Pedrick was doing to?
Well,
so he didn't have to oversee
the scuttle, I was told, was that the harbor master also got yard services. I have no truth. I have no idea.
You gotta love how we download those deals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that person who told me was also fired or left the harbor a couple months later. So.
Okay.
I don't know.
There's a lot here. And I think the takeaway is that, according to you, the harbor will not have funds on July 1st. Like, are we talking like absolute zero, no money? Or are we talking about we are already there because we can't pay our debts and we're using our monthly income to pay the employees?
I would say both. We're already there because we can't pay our obligations. But also in our bylaws, it states that we must receive 12-month cash flow projections. I've asked for them many, many times. With refusal, we cannot receive and will not be given cash flow projections. So the board actually has no idea when we run out of money or who we can't pay first. We just keep getting fed information and accepting the information we're given.
So there's no documentation to prove any of the things that any harbor employee stands up to say.
No, and the documentation I'm asked for, I'm not given. I've had to start CPRA requesting, California Public Records Act requesting documents that I would like as a commissioner, and I'm still not given them.
You have CPRA requests filed as a harbor commissioner for the entity that you were voted to.
Correct.
Steward.
And I still can't get the documents. And at this point, I think the only way to get the documents is either to request them for the other party. So I've asked for email communication with the USDA, and the USDA got upset with me because we designated Miss Moreno. Well, I've already requested the emails from Miss Moreno and Mr. Rademacher for these communications. What are you talking? What is being said with the USDA? What can the board expect? And I'm supposed to believe whatever is being said in open session, except June 25th, you told us we didn't need insurance when you then turned around and said, I was wrong. I finally read the document and we need insurance, but I'm going to try to talk them out of making us be insured.
But, okay, so it boggles my mind. So essentially, because I do look at the people that we have elected to be the bosses of the staff, regardless of whether it's the city or the county or the harbor, the library board. The library board is responsible for whatever the library does, the librarian does, and all of the staff, right? That's the boss. So you're telling essentially the employees, I would like this information, and they're just withholding it from you.
Correct.
Is that because they're being protected and told by the other harbor commissioners you don't have to provide anything to Commissioner Nehmer?
Some of it. I asked for the 12-month cash flow projection, and the chair said at this time he wasn't going to make staff do it because they had to focus on other things.
But they still have to have that to make the budget for July. Because you have to, by California law, you have to have... your budget has to zero out. Like, you have to have a budget.
Our budget currently doesn't zero out. It is negative $75,000, and it was approved by the board at negative $75,000. So instead of having negative $75,000, this is on recording, Ms. Moreno said, we're going to pay payroll through grants. And then...
the grants, okay.
Then the grant
grants
money...
are specific. Like, we're public radio. We're community radio, right? So... We operate on grants. We live on grants. They're specific. I can't take a grant that's supposed to buy an antenna and pay for equipment that's not the antenna. I can't use a grant that's specific to produce a program about emergencies and then use that to buy a vehicle. I mean, like, you're allotted. You have to, and then you have to justify those purchases. Is part of the grant is paying those things?
Part of the grant allows for administration fees of administering a grant. So the hope was that we'd start collecting on the grant early enough that they could claim a lot of hours, $75,000 worth of hours of
administrating the grant.
Of administrating the grant through staff. except there was no
But a
possibility
grant
for that.
administrator is the person who tracks that. So maintenance is not a grant administrator. Maintenance is maintenance.
That was all
Harbor
the harbor
Patrol.
master pay.
Oh, is a $75,000.
Except
So they
if you
wouldn't
did
be
the
the
quick
administrator of the
numbers,
grant.
we were too far into the year for him to even write off $75,000 at 40 hours a week.
That makes sense too. Okay.
So, but 3 of the board members approved that budget. And then now we're supposed to be doing the budget again. It's been over 3 months since that approval. And then, so they established a budget and audit ad hoc committee. They initially appointed Weber and Evans to it. I notified the attorney that there was still a standing committee that had never been abolished, a finance committee. So why aren't we using the standing finance committee where you would follow the Brown Act and make it public and transparent when you're talking about the budget and audit?
Yeah, nobody wants to talk about budgets in public. It was
so we
the
abolished
end all
that
to try to
standing
get that for the
committee.
county.
So we don't have to do it in public. Let's abolish the standing committee
Jeez.
and appoint an ad hoc committee so we don't have to do it in public. And reluctantly, they appointed Weber and myself. Right after that meeting, they went to sign checks, and they one of them didn't want to sign more checks because he'd done it the last 3 times. All 5 of us are authorized to sign checks. Only 2 commissioners have to sign a check, but all 5 of us are authorized. I said, I'm not signing those checks until the budget balances. It needs to reach 0 for me to sign checks. And they got pretty mad at that. The chair pulled me off of the budget and audit committee. You would think the person fighting for a budget to at least go up to 0 would be kept on it, but instead they removed me. I did reach out to our attorney to make sure I was still upholding my fiduciary duties. And as long as I'm not blocking things like payroll and such, I'm upholding my duties.
Okay.
There are
So
5
who
of us.
is the Harbor's attorney?
Ryan Plotz. He's out of Eureka with the Mitchell Law Firm.
Okay.
He also... he was part of the Fashion Blacksmith case. So many people don't know this, but he was hired by the Harbor's attorney company to represent the Harbor during the Fashion Blacksmith case.
Okay.
And I don't know how he came to the Harbor, but again,
So he's represented the Harbor before.
yes.
Okay.
He was an attorney for the insurance company, and the insurance company, this is how it was clarified to me, the insurance company was representing the Harbor. The insurance company hired him, not the Harbor, before.
Okay.
So
he's the one that was on the losing end, the attorney on the losing end for the Fashion Blacksmith case is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
And initially we hired him in closed session, and I had to file a cure and correct because after we hired him out in closed session, a member of the public said, do you know who this guy is? How come the public didn't know about him before you hired him? And that's when I learned more about the Brown Act, and not just the Brown Act, but there are only certain things you're allowed to do in closed session, and hiring your attorney isn't one of them.
Yeah. So it sounds to me, right, definitely it's FUBAR, but a lot of this is that the new commissioners that come in don't understand the Brown Act, don't understand what their fiduciary responsibilities are, don't know what their jobs are, don't know how to conduct meetings, don't know what it is that they do. I mean, because when Gerhard Weber was the chairman, he was accused of misogyny, and I think there may or may not still be a legal case, because he doesn't let women speak during the meetings. He gavels them out, and then he tries to have them arrested. I mean, it's not funny, but it is so bizarre. You have to laugh at these things that, like, I know people who don't live anywhere near Dinout County or even in the state of California that will message me and just be like, oh my God, we watched your Harbor meeting, or we listened to your Harbor meeting. And there's like these little pockets of places that get together and are horrified by our Harbor meetings outside of the state of California, just because it's like the shit show. It's a soap opera.
You can't make it up.
Right. So is there something that we can do to like pass a law that says if you're elected to office in Del Norte County, you have to have this training so that you know how to conduct a meeting, so you know what the Brown Act is, so you know that you can't just do these things because you feel like it and you have a penis and that makes you the final arbitrator on all things?
Well, there are already rules and regulations so we have to take 2 hours of Brown Act training. But I went to those meetings for 3 years. If you go to a meeting that's already run FUBAR, so that's why if some people have seen me sitting in the County Board of Supervisors, sometimes I go to other meetings just to see how real meetings are run correctly and just to see how poorly ours are run, because you get this, it's hard,
Maybe I should do that for interviews. Just go watch other people's interviews so I know how to do it correctly.
Well, this one's going great.
These aren't interviews, though. They're conversations. So it's not the same thing.
Yeah. So, when I went to these meetings and this idea of how is a meeting supposed to be run, I knew it wasn't correct, but I have to learn. And I went to a few other harbor meetings just to kind of get the concept and reading their websites to learn what we were missing. But if you've never sat in on a well-run meeting or several times, then it's hard to know what to do behind the scenes. And also when it comes to the Brown Act, if your predecessors, the seniors on your board, don't know how to run a meeting, how do you follow in their footsteps? They're the ones that are chairing the board the first or second year when you're learning the ropes and supposed to be kind of guiding you and setting that example. And if you don't have that example, you're not just trying to learn it on your own, you're going against the grain. And so if you're doing it right, you may feel like you're doing it wrong. I promise. I have felt many times like I'm doing something incorrectly, even though I'm following the law.
Right. Didn't California pass an ordinance that a law went into effect in January of 26 this year, that all public meetings have to be video recorded, and made available to the public to watch live. Right. So that's not just Zoom. That is like what the county and the city do with their YouTube channel, right? So you have to record it and post it. You have to make it available here. You have to do all of those things. Because the harbor doesn't. You can listen to it after the fact, if you can find it, and then you can watch it live on Zoom.
There was a population number that was attached to that. So Our county is smaller than that population requirement. So we're actually exceeding the standards at this point. It seems kind of odd. I don't know why we don't publish the Zoom meeting. It's on Zoom. I always find any follow-up meeting or meeting I've missed much easier to watch when it's on Zoom instead of just the voice recording.
Right.
I do know.
And it Zoom automatically will record when you hit record.
Right.
That's the default. You actually have to go in there and program it to just record the audio. So somebody had to go in there on the back end and say, just record the audio, please.
Yeah.
But so here's my point. I do think if the meetings were recorded and put onto YouTube, with it being as FUBAR as it is, that would be a revenue stream. I think you could hit the entire goals for YouTube to become monetized.
Well, the board has tried little things like, Brookings has a
monetize a YouTube channel.
Yeah, monetize. We can't monetize. I was going to say we can't monetize our webcam. So we have a sunset cam. Brookings has one for their harbor interest, and on there, harbor entrance for their camera, you can sponsor for $100 a month to get your name on the corner of their camera. So it's like, hey, we could do that too. The board approved it, but we just can't get any follow through.
When was that approved?
Well, we can't quite get it approved either because we made it on the fee schedule, which is part of the ordinances, and we've been doing those for over a year.
So the harbor is going bankrupt, and nobody wants to do anything about it or to increase revenue. I'm still going to go with you need to start a YouTube channel and see if you can get the board to approve having your meetings recorded and put up on YouTube. I
would love if you brought that recommendation to the next meeting. That would be fantastic.
When is the next harbor meeting?
The next harbor meeting is Wednesday. We are the second and fourth Wednesday at 2 p.m. So the next meeting will be held April 22nd, 2026 at 2 p.m. at the harbor office, which is 101 Citizens Dock Road. 101
Citizens Dock Road. So if the meeting's on Wednesday, so Tuesday there'll be a special meeting because you guys like to have those too.
We've recently, we try to have the special meetings right before the meeting now. So
that makes no sense to me. Why have a special meeting before you're going to have your regular harbor meeting? Is that because it didn't make the agenda in time? I have so many questions.
Well, You're stumping me here. I'm stuttering.
Sorry.
It's often I can give you a lot of numbers. I can give you law. I can give you some concrete answers, but FUBAR.
But because you have to post a meeting 24 hours in advance and make the agenda public. So if you're going to suddenly have a special meeting, I just, oh
Well,
my
our
God.
bylaws, again, let me come back to our bylaws. Our bylaws dictate that closed session is supposed to be after our open session. And rather than edit our bylaws or delete that section so we can follow maybe the county where they do closed session before open session or make a resolution, they went to doing special meetings before the open session to do the closed session before the open session instead of a resolution. And now because nobody's said anything, you can see I know about this and I'm aware that we just stopped doing the special sessions and just went to doing closed before open, even though it violates our bylaws, because if you contain the right pair of chromosomes,
If you have a penis,
you can violate the bylaws.
Why am I the only woman that will just say that?
I do not have a pair of XY chromosomes, so I do not get to violate the bylaws.
Gotcha.
However, if you have XY, you can violate them as much as you'd like.
Yeah, they seem to violate it with whatever they like, whenever they want, on a regular basis. And I mean, as a gender.
Yes.
So, yeah, they need to stop violating all around. This has been a fascinating conversation. Most of the time I like talking to you. I would love for you to come back, but I think if you're going to come back and we're going to continue to have these conversations about the different things, that you're going to need to bring bourbon. And I don't drink.
They do make some non-alcoholic bourbon these days.
I need the alcohol is what I'm saying to talk to you any more about this.
We can pretend.
I have a headache.
I leave every meeting with a headache.
But I wasn't elected to the harbor. I didn't choose this. Annie, thank you for being here. Commissioner Nehmer, thank you for being here. I appreciate the insight and answering my questions and the conversation. And with or without the bourbon, I will be happy to hold the mic for you again when you choose to come back.
Thank you, Heather.
Bye-bye.
Bye.